that's a subtle way to do that. I really love that. Like, what are some other ways you think? What's a way you've coached someone who was on the fence to finally kind of be more real and just jump in the water?
Well, I mean, if that person would show up on video, it's probably the fastest because
Hmm.
you literally put your cell phone in front of your face.
Yeah.
And one thing that is an easy piece of content is, what is my take on? Like,
Hmm.
grab a news article in your industry and give some commentary, right? Or a
Yeah.
con. And I always say you got to know what you're saying no to. And when you don't have a presence as a CEO or a leader, you are the collective of what else the internet says about you. And
Huh.
so it's a really great opportunity to own that narrative and
Yeah.
to show up in the best way possible. And it's LinkedIn. I mean, it's not like it's this hugely personal
Yeah.
side of you. It's just talk about your people, talk about your culture,
Yeah.
what you're passionate about.
That's really true. It's funny as you say that. I'm thinking about, I think a lot of the CEOs I would talk to say they don't do it because, quote unquote, I don't do social media, or, nobody cares, no one's looking there. And I think the reality is, of course they are. And the idea that it's a choice to not do it is pretty interesting. It's funny. I saw, I don't know if you saw this post recently, but I saw something where, as a joke, someone said, if I became a multi-billionaire, the first thing I'd do is I would buy LinkedIn and then I would turn it off. And just like the general sort of distaste for, um, kind of what it is, what it's become. I think the AI slop factor is out there. I'm almost embarrassed to confess that we put some stuff out in the last year that was like, I don't know if I love that, and we stopped it. And I think it's got a smell to it, and people realize that. And so maybe talk a little bit about, that sentiment, and maybe, if you dreamed of a better world, what would that be like on LinkedIn, for example?
I think it's just being vulnerable, like in a
Mm.
real way. I have joked with my team that my horrible spelling is now totally in style because
Mm.
it shows that I'm not a robot.
Yeah.
And the ums and ahs actually prove that we're humans.
Yeah.
I do think that it's okay to not like something and recognize it's a business tool.
Mm.
I mean, if you look at our cell phones, we understand how important our cell phones are to our business, right? I mean, most business
Mhm.
leaders are giving their phones out to important customers or their employees. Do you still get spam on your cell phone?
Of
Yes.
course.
Are you still annoyed at it when you see your screen time report? Yes. We just have to treat these things as part of business. And again, opportunity cost risk, I think, is what every business leader needs to make for themselves. But I think too much we get in this headspace of like ego or deterministic of like, I don't want to do this because, and what I really find is a lot of this is insecurity of showing up and not knowing
Oh,
what
yeah.
to say and not feeling comfortable in your own skin, whatever that is. That's
Right.
really why people don't post.
It's funny you say that with the ums and the ahs. I think, I remember doing like a video training with someone a while ago, and the difference between trying to get a perfect take, whatever that could possibly be, might take you all day or multiple days, or you could just talk through what you're going to do in 90 seconds and be done and move on. And I don't know where, the expectation comes about, no, certainly no one who's listening expects it to be perfect. And to your point, and um and ah signals this is real. And I think, one of the greatest influence moments is, kind of admitting a weakness is proven to be a way to kind of draw someone in. And that's a subtle way to do that. I really love that. Like, what are some other ways you think, what's a way you've coached someone who was on the fence to finally kind of be more real and just jump in the water?
Well, I mean, if that person would show up on video, it's probably the
Hmm.
fastest because
Hmm.
you literally put your cell phone in front of your face.
Yeah.
And one thing that is an easy piece of content is, what is my take on? Like,
Hmm.
grab a news article in your industry and give some commentary, right? Or a
Yeah.
contrast statement. I thought that we had the best PTO policy, and then I learned
Hmm.
X, right? Those contrast and reframing. Most people don't have a hard time remembering that as they're speaking, and they can be
Hmm.
short pieces of information. and they've been used in communications and advertising for years, right? People are
Mhm.
drawn to that.
That's really good. So I feel like I've zeroed in a little bit on what an individual might say. As someone coming from social strategy, uh, how should people think about what their, quote unquote company page says versus what they say, and how do you make those make sense together? Like, how do you navigate like that? Plus, of course, they're in multiple channels. I know one of the things I struggled with was, on my Instagram, I've got a company, I've got a me company, but I also have a me personal because I don't need to have pictures of my dog along with recent projects, that kind of thing. How do you navigate keeping that straight for people?
I think that marketers care more about that than the users. I think consumers want to be spoken to as consumers
Hmm.
and as approachable humans on all platforms.
Yeah.
And I think in the marketing space, we've always been like super professional, which means you have to have perfect punctuation and grammar. And actually, I've seen reports of things that are a little more informal on LinkedIn do amazing,
Hmm.
right? And I think
Sure.
like the opposite on Instagram. So I would keep most copy and tone pretty friendly, approachable feeling. I think that's actually what brings people in, even if you
Mhm.
are in a very B2B space. And I also think that marketing strategy and social strategy for this year and beyond is all about, and a lot about what we talk on this podcast, like the flexibility in operations, because it
Mhm.
is a test deploy mindset.
Mhm. Sure.
And the people that are using last year's strategy to get next year's are the ones that are really pulling their hair out right now.
That's right. It's funny. We talked to a lot of customers about how to get your experiments conceived of and then out there in the world and tested and pulled out if they're not working
Yeah.
as quickly as possible. Getting good at doing an experiment, I think, works at so many different layers of the business. That's really totally endorse that. Um, I'm wondering. I wonder if this only works for bigger brands. But what do you think about, for example, a brand like think about, for example, a brand like who is it? I think as we date ourselves recently, the CEO of McDonald's had that sort of famously super awkward bite of a product, and then some of the other brands came out and kind of clowned him for it. Um, that feels like something. Maybe I'll ask your opinion. It feels like something only big brands can do, but can small brands do? Like what can a company voice do that maybe a personal voice can't?
Yeah, I think that is one of my favorite like PR moments because
Mm.
there's razzing, there's teasing,
Right,
but we're not talking about anything that's going to seriously harm or
right.
belittle a human, right? Somebody taking an awkward video and a small bite of a hamburger is not the worst case scenario.
Mhm.
And so I think that's a really good example of playing on a trend or, leveraging just the moment
Yeah,
to get some attention. I think there's brands that have done this in horrible taste and they don't know where to like jump
mm,
in and where to
sure.
stay out of the
Yeah,
conversation. So I think that is the human nuance that we have to protect
yeah,
and use AI and other tools to make us better at that.
yeah. That's right. I feel like I can't remember which brand it was, but someone jumped onto that Coldplay CEO spotlight thing a little way too late and way too wrong. And it was like, ugh, we missed the boat on that one.
Yeah.
So you bring up AI. Obviously, a lot of our work is in AI, especially around like kind of the more technology side of things. But we're getting more into this idea of AEO or having our customer work show up in search engines, and it's just in LLMs. Talk about what you're doing to impact social content through the lens of an LLM or a bot seeing it first, and that's how a user interacts with it.
Yeah, so the thing that I really do feel like works the best for that particular strategy is to, and I always like think of this as like a lion, like kind of getting big, right? Like
Mhm.
filling the space, filling the air, because the more platforms, the more like variation of content, the different backlinks that come to and from your social really do help understand and get into the LLMs. They all are going to pull it up differently. So there is a frustration point of like, I can't actually control this stuff. But I think what approach we take is being intentional. If you have a new product launch or you have a really unaware service or a
Mhm.
feature, and making sure that that gets out into the world in both written content, long form and short form, does make a difference. Like we've seen it directly being able to be influenced by the LLMs.
Mhm.
But content for content's sake feels ick to a
Hmm.
lot of the human side. And I would be very cautious of that, unless you kind of understand the risks, because you don't want
Okay.
to hurt that brand trust.
Yeah. Uh, can you think of an example of that going wonderfully right or horribly wrong that would paint that picture?
Um, I, I see it horribly wrong all the time. I think people don't realize that, if even though they may not be getting engagement on their social media posts and maybe they don't have a lot of followers, that content can still be seen by people who matter to your
Hmm.
business. And so if you're just pumping out AI slop on Twitter or X, or whatever Facebook, I see so many people just kind of throw their Facebook page like, well, we're just going to post. But
Yeah.
just because people aren't engaging doesn't mean they're not seeing it. And I think it really does create some brand trust issues.
Hmm.
And it just feels, as a consumer, like you want to hide it.
Yeah, I do feel that, and I think that this is one of those that Supreme Court case about kind of indecent content was sort of like, I can't always describe it, but I know it when I see it. I think we're all getting to that point where it just, I don't know what that is, but I don't love it. That's a great call. Kind of, going along those lines, is there any sort of is there like a social media best practice that you think is actually just really bad advice that people seem to keep doing over and over again?
Um, yeah, not proofing their AI output.
Mhm.
um,
Right, exactly,
I
right,
mean,
yeah.
I think the companies that win are going to be the companies that know strategically where to place the human checkpoints.
Sure.
And the companies that lose are those, even if they're both using the same tool
Yeah.
sets, but they don't know where to insert the humans in the workflows. I think those are the ones that are going to
Yeah.
have the biggest challenges, because we all know that these tools are amazing and capable of a
Mhm.
lot of things. But I've seen so many businesses try to connect end to end, like a strategy output all the way to a social media post
Yeah.
without checkpoints, and it's the output's horrible. Like
Yeah.
you got to have the middle ground to tweak and adjust.
That's right. I think something I feel like I've been kind of screaming into the wind about has been, these tales of like AI being, completely replacing a job or a sector and, running out completely on their own. I haven't seen anything where I say to myself, I would completely trust this to act on my behalf or say things on my behalf. Like there's no world in which that's happening. And, I may be proven wrong. It doesn't seem like we're getting a lot closer. Like it seems like progress is slowing down. These are all kind of speculative things here. And so I think you're right. The human in the loop idea, or, proofing it, like you can't just trust it. Seems like that's just and I'm sure there have been disasters I can't think of, but it seems like that's a mess in the making.
Yeah, I think the disasters that I see happen like on repeat
Yeah.
is the content goes out, right? It was on autopilot because we're
Mhm.
making things efficient. Content goes out, comments start, the bot responds to the content. So again, no humans
Oh
are
yeah.
paying attention
Yeah.
to this. And then snowball, snowball, snowball. Now we have a PR crisis on our hands.
Yeah.
And if we just would have had set checkpoints, I think
Mhm.
that could be a huge like fix, right?
Yeah.
The other one I see a lot, speaking of like response and moderation, I understand that that is a hard customer service like role. And again, operationally, it's really tricky because it's typically not the marketing department, it's the customer service department. However, I think that's where people start, where they're like, oh, I just going to build a bot that'll answer all my comments.
Yeah.
But I see that being a really like high risk and
Mhm.
like not as not the best part to just throw a
Right.
bot in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so one of the things I think a lot about is, shifting gears a little bit. If we're thinking about our audience as hopefully CEOs looking for an edge of, a way to do things differently better. I got some advice from a coach recently-ish, said something like, if you look at the time you're spending on anything, go look at what you do as a CEO, and you know, take what you're trying to make a year or what you made last year and divide it by the hours. If you're not doing things that are making you $2,500 an hour, whatever that is, then give that to somebody else.
Mhm.
And so I feel like I run into people who think like, okay, well, it's not worth my time to invest on social. And what we've talked a lot about today so far has been that there is value. But if you were to give like, so if I'm a CEO listening, okay, great, I need to go do something. What and how much? Like, what's your guidance on like what's a healthy, productive, and dare I say positive ROI investment in time on platforms like this?
Well, I would say quality over quantity.
Mhm.
So some people can generate very high quality in a short amount of time. So that's where I would start. I mean, the actual filming and delivering of the content could
Mm.
be an hour. And so it's a lot of this is like know yourself, but it does work. Like I
Mhm.
promise you, as the leader of the company, not only for sales and like marketing purposes, but for recruitment, because your employees are going to be
Oh
watching
yeah.
your LinkedIn posts as well. And so hiring a great new salesperson or a new leadership position, they're going to be watching that. And that
Mhm.
ROI is extremely valuable because you'll
Right.
save your recruitment costs, right? You'll save your
Yeah.
friction costs. So I would look at it on both sides of the equation and either measure the gap, like can I reduce my recruitment cost or gain volume, or on the sales side, can I support my sales team so they can repurpose and reuse that messaging
Yeah.
on sales calls?
Yeah, that's great. How about like thinking about what you measure, what you typically like to measure for your clients? Um, what for you is a good measure of whether it's working or not? Like, there's probably a certain level of engagement, a certain level of like conversions or something. Like, if I'm investing time, what would you say to someone? Is like, here's how you know that you're doing it and it's going in the right direction.
Yeah, so actually, this is something that is very important to us. Obviously, a lot of people ask this question.
Yeah.
Right now, I would really look at high intent items. So, a lot of the platforms you can see saves, you can see
Mhm.
long text based comments. And so, look for those things that actually matter to the intention of someone's connection to you and not just volume. I would
Mm.
rather see 5 saves on a post than to see 300 just quick reactions. And I think that's a big shift because we're used to
Yeah.
measuring volume, and so I think you start with intent and then you look at other marketing metrics that may have correlations if you don't
Yeah.
have direct conversions.
That's true, and I think especially if we're both working in mid-market, the idea that you're gonna have a post kinda quote unquote "blow up" is pretty low, right? And so, I would take 7 very high intent saves over, I once had one post get, multiple six-figure likes because it had something to do with the Chicago Bulls, and it had nothing to do like, I was just riding a wave.
Right.
That's meaningless for the business, but whereas, a post that got often I would find that especially video posts do pretty well, that, just having your face out there reminds people you exist even. And, oh, that's right. I need to call Mike about XYZ. So I will go in and say that, I'm eating the dog food or drinking the Kool-Aid or whatever the right metaphor is, that it's really worked for me. So I fully endorse all the stuff we talked about today so far.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think too, for all of the very like numbers driven
mhm,
CEOs out there, I get it. However, I would also encourage you to think about the relationships that you are building and really still
mhm,
try to build a relationship, because we're not often associating ROI numbers and metrics
mhm,
to our customer meetings, right? How many of those we're having.
mhm.
And so I would treat it like that.
Yeah. That's really good. So let me one final question. I think you've been at this current venture since 2012. Is there anything for you that you believe maybe in 2012 that you've totally changed your mind on and kind of would go back and advise younger Beth to say, "Oh man, I wish I knew this."
Oh, that's a good question. I think uh, the thing that I've learned so much as the years have gone by is just everything is easy until it isn't on social, and that's where the like problems start. So CEOs, especially those that are not marketing minded, tend to just throw social media to the
Mm,
youngest person in the office. And it works until it doesn't, until you have a customer that didn't get a response, or a PR crisis bubbling up that someone didn't
Mhm.
miss or someone missed, and it just becomes this massive headache, and then they care. And
Mm. Right.
I really have seen that happen time and time again. And it's we don't hire entry level people anymore because
Right.
we have
Right.
really realized that you need to be a strategist in order to figure this stuff out.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, if you are listening and you would like some of that strategy, what's the best way to find you in the world and online?
Yeah, LinkedIn, it's just Beth Trejo, Trejo, or you can always email me, and it's just Beth at ChatterKick, KICK.com.
Well, great. I hope people do, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. And thanks for all the great stuff today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to talk.
Oh, all right. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the Digital Transformist. I don't know if you're a like person or a comment person or a subscribe person, but do one of those to get more content just like this.